Thank you very much for coming to this afternoon's event. My name's Doug Irwin. I'm a professor in the economics department and co-director of the Political Economy Project. And before we get to our event, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the Political Economy Project, which sponsors courses, sponsors events at the intersection of economics and politics. Our next event is this Wednesday. I'd like to tell you about. If you're interested in hearing more about our events, see me afterwards and we can get you on our email list, or you can check out our website. But this Wednesday, we have our history department's Udi Greenberg speaking about his new book, The End of Schism, about the reconciliation between the Catholic and the Protestant varieties of religion. And his book was just published this past spring. We'll have free copies for the first 20 students who appear. He will be in Rocky 1 this Wednesday from 5 to 6, talking about his book. As I said, we have other events this fall that you can look at on our website, but I'm really delighted to introduce our speaker.
Hey, Doug, you have to hold the microphone.
Okay. I thought I could project. Enough. Okay, I will do that. Thank you, Russ. That's my co-director. Now you see what I have to deal with. Anyway, we all appreciate Taylor Swift as a great musical genius and a great musical talent. But what is sometimes underappreciated is just how business savvy she is and how she's navigated a very difficult market in very turbulent times. And we're absolutely delighted to have Kevin Evers here, who is a senior editor at the Harvard Business Review, to talk about his book, There's Nothing Like This, The Strategic Genius of Taylor Swift. Kevin has edited best-selling and award-winning books on high performance, creativity, innovation, digital disruption, marketing, and strategy. And he's written many popular articles in addition to this book on Hollywood blockbusters, brain science, the art of persuasion, and the unpredictability of success. A lot of this comes together, of course, in talking about Taylor Swift. And of course, there were a few free copies up there if you were early enough to get them. But let me welcome Kevin to the stage here. So thank you very much for coming, and congratulations on this terrific book. A first question is usually, what motivated you to write this book? I suspect I know the answer to that, but I'm just curious, in your own mind, what prompted you to write this book?
Well, I have to say, it didn't take much soul searching. I came up with the idea in 2022, so this was before the Eras tour. And I've just been really impressed with Taylor's longevity. It's really, really hard to build a career that she has in music. Most careers in music, even really popular ones, last about 8 years. And that's for a great artist. And she's operating in a really, really turbulent industry. The music industry has gone through some pretty radical disruptions over the last 20 years, and Taylor has found a way to turn those challenges and opportunities. And I wanted to really take a deep dive into her career and try to figure out how exactly has she done this. And the book starts off with a popular meme that tends to go around when Taylor Swift breaks a new record, and she's 14 years old, I think she's 12 years old. She's singing the national anthem at a 76ers game, and she doesn't look much older than my daughter, who's 8 years old, and she has a cardigan on, and she's gripping the mic, and the caption reads, "Someone tell this girl she's about to have the highest grossing tour of all time," which is the Eras tour. I feel like that sums up my approach to the book. How is it this 12-year-old girl turned into a Beatles-esque phenomenon?
And tell me a little bit about the research. I take it you didn't actually get to interview her or many of her team, but how did you learn more about her process over the years?
I tried to get her to talk to me, but she was very busy. She was going around the globe for her Eras tour, so that didn't quite work out. The great thing about Taylor is she is so articulate about her own career decisions, and she's been very forthcoming about her career decisions. Lately, not so much. She doesn't really do interviews anymore, except for the New Heights podcast, which was a rare appearance for her. But very early on in her career, she would do many interviews. She would talk about all of her challenges in her career, and I really pulled from a lot of those interviews. And that's what excited me about writing the book, is because a lot of business books break someone's success down into a series of recipes, and they devote each chapter to, risk-taking or fan obsession or et cetera, et cetera. But I thought with this book, I could write it in chronological order, and I could follow Taylor from the time she's 16 years old all the way up to current day. I believe she's 35 right now, and really see how she made decisions and overcame challenges. And the best way I could do that is bringing in what I do best. And I'm an editor at Harvard Business Review, so I'm steeped in business content, but I also love research on psychology and creativity and high performance and art and music. And I was able to bring a lot of that research in to give her decision making more context.
In terms of her decision making over the years, how would you compare sort of late teens Taylor, who, as you said, was very outspoken and very honest and open about what she wanted to achieve and what she wanted to do, with sort of early 30s Taylor? Has there been much change, or is there the continuity sort of strike you more?
She's very bold and continues to be very bold. And this is what surprised me the most about the book, because when Taylor started out in 2006, that's when her first album came out, I was in my early 20s. I was in grad school. I was listening to Radiohead and Wilco and indie rock. Taylor Swift wasn't really on my radar. And so I didn't know much about her early career. And when you look at her, when she was 16, she looks like she's out of country music central casting. She's blonde hair, blue eyes. But really, she wasn't, because country music at the time was very male-centric. It continues to be very male-centric. And the consensus was there's no audience for a teenage singer singing for teenage girls. And Taylor didn't believe in that. She wanted to write her own songs, and she wanted to write those songs for an audience of her peers, and she pushed. And that was her vision. And many people told her, this is a bad idea. You need to wait until you're 18. You need to wait until you're older. And she didn't do that, and she ended up being right. And a big reason why she was right is, yes, there are other teenage girls that tried to make it in country music and didn't make it. But they, for the most part, were singing songs that other people had written for them. And in some cases, those people writing those songs were 40 to 50-year-old men. And Taylor has always co-written her own songs, even at that early age. And she was really able to super serve an underserved market. She knew that an audience existed for her music, and she was right. And she broke through, and because she was so persistent, she ended up being a category of one, because in country music, there was no one else like her at the time. So she didn't have much competition, because all those teenage girls were flocking to Taylor Swift, and they didn't have many other options.
And, we talk about how early on she sort of had this vision. She writes her own songs. She's original. She's not relying on outsourced songs or things of that sort. But when you say that you have that vision early on, and you say there's this strategic aspect to the way she's thinking, it all sounds contrived. So there's this authenticity. It's her speaking, but also she's thinking about the future too. So how do we balance these things, that she has a path that she wants to pursue, but it's not, it's thoughtful, but it's not driven by business per se?
Right. Especially very early on in her career. I say this in the book. I don't think Taylor was, at 16 years old, was reading Harvard Business Review or reading academic research on what she should be doing. A lot of this was intuitive, but intuition is a really important part of how we make decisions. And I think she really felt like she should be writing her own songs. And that was a strength-based approach. She was really good at writing songs, even at a very early age. So she decided to go in that direction. But this also led her to make other bold decisions. She was getting interest from major labels at the time, but they all told her that she needed to wait, that they wouldn't sign her until she was 18. She had a development deal with RCA, which is one of the biggest labels on Nashville's Music Row at the time. And the thing with the development deal is it's almost like being in the minor leagues in baseball. They paid for producers, they paid her to create demos, and then after a year, they have a decision. They can say, you can do this for another year. We'll extend your contract for another year. We'll let you go, or we'll let you go. Or they'll sign you to a record contract, which is the ultimate goal. That's what you want. And they don't do this as much anymore, but they were doing this back in 2006. They decided to shelve Taylor. So Taylor decided to walk away from RCA, one of the biggest labels in Nashville. And she ended up signing with a man named Scott Borchetta, who at the time was an executive at Universal Music Group, and he told her, I want to sign you, but there's a catch. I'm leaving Universal Music Group to form my own label. That label did not have a headquarters. It did not have a name. He did not have resources. He did not have employees. Yet Taylor went with him because he believed in her vision. And if you look back, I don't know if I would be able to make a decision like that, to leave a major label for someone who is just starting his label. Now, he wasn't selling record contracts out of the back of his Buick, but I mean, it's pretty close. And she went with him because he believed in her vision, and he was a huge promotional guy. That's what he did at Universal, and that's what she needed. She really needed someone to hustle on her behalf. And I think if she went with a major label, there's so much bureaucracy in organizations, and even if she had someone that really believed in her, that person would have had to convince their boss, I think convince their boss's boss that Taylor Swift was worth giving a lot of attention to. But Scott Borchetta didn't have any of those limitations because he had a lot of skin in the game. He really needed Taylor Swift to succeed.
And that's not the only time she's made a very risky decision.
Yeah.
And in the book, you talk about her decision to pivot from country to pop.
Mm-hmm.
And what was interesting in the book is that, these are very separate markets.
Yeah.
And country's bigger than pop.
Yeah.
And so she took this leap of leaving where she was a success, was her home originally, to make this, very uncertain decision about whether you could be an artist that succeeds elsewhere. Tell us about that decision-making and what that tells us about her.
Yeah. This is another thing that really surprised me about Taylor as I was researching the book is, I guess I went into this book thinking that she had downloaded the Superstar playbook and followed its directions to a T. But the opposite is actually true. Some of her best decisions were her riskiest decisions, and her move from country to pop is a prime example of this. Now, Taylor, before she moved to pop, fully into pop and left country music behind, was doing something that many brands would love to do, and that is operate in two different markets and dominate two markets. She had completely cornered the country market. She was the most played artist on country radio at the time. And she had slowly moved into pop. Her music was being played on pop radio. But by going full on pop, she was leaving an entire market behind, and that was country music. She couldn't depend on those relationships. She couldn't depend on that radio play. That's a risky decision. She was coming off of 3 straight #1 albums by using this dual market strategy. And most of us, this is basic psychology, we're risk averse. We were worried about loss. The fear of loss overwhelms the opportunity for gains. Yet Taylor made this decision to go to pop music and leave behind the genre that she had fought so hard to dominate. And it worked in her favor. She moved to pop music. She expanded her global appeal, even though she had left that market behind. And a big reason why she did that is that album 1989, she executed really well. It's a great pop album. And it created a lot of new fans for her. But I think the reason why she was also able to make that risk is because of her fan base. I think she had spent years and years and years cultivating this fan base, and she was betting on the fact that although she was leaving her chosen genre, that a lot of those fans would still go along in the ride with her, and that's exactly what they did.
Has she taken similar risks that haven't paid off, or is she just sort of somehow naturally lucky that every risk pays off?
So not everything she does is risky. I would say very early on in her career, I don't think besides her bold decisions of leaving RCA and signing up with Scott Borchetta, the first 3 albums of her career, she wasn't taking massive risks. Those first 3 albums they were different enough where it kept fans engaged, but they weren't so different that it alienated her fan base. And I think that was the right move at the time. It's like incremental change, be very consistent in what you're doing, build trust with your audience. She does take some risks, as I mentioned. I'm trying to think offhand of something that she's done that hasn't worked out. She has made she has had some strategic missteps. Don't get me wrong. I think in around 2019, she released her album Lover, and compared to other artists, that album was a success, but compared to Taylor Swift, that album was not a success at all. The numbers just weren't as great as her previous albums. And a big reason why she struggled during that era is she was slow to adapt to streaming. In 2014, she very publicly took all of her music off of Spotify. She had a very public feud with Spotify. And a big reason for that was economic. She was still selling physical albums. She was still selling digital albums. If she was putting her album on Spotify, especially Spotify's free tier that had ads, she was cannibalizing her own sales. And she was really the only artist who could do this. But fast forward 4 to 5 years later, the Spotify user base had increased by close to 700% at that point. So all of her fans are on Spotify. And Spotify is not just a way we access music, it's changed the way we listen to music and our expectations around that music and what we expect from artists. And one of the biggest changes is you need to engage with your fans on a more frequent basis. Once you have your fans engaged, which is really, really hard to do in this scattered media landscape that we're operating in, you need to continue to engage them. And that's why during the pandemic, Taylor surprise dropped an album, Folklore, and then just the fire hose continued. She's released, I believe, 8 albums in the last 5 years. 4 of those are re-records, but 4 of those are original albums. She used to be very precious about her releases, and now she's extremely prolific. And that change led to the huge demand in the Eras Tour, but has also led to the way that she's catapulted and how her success and how her popularity has skyrocketed at this point.
So at lunch with students, you used 2 words that really struck me. Music first and fan-based. How does that sort of define her as an artist and as a business person, and what does each of those mean?
I'll start with music first. Taylor has a reputation for, a lot of people throw the word calculated around, which is not a great term. But I do think a lot of people think that everything she does is calculated, everything she does is strategic, and I don't necessarily agree with that. A lot of her decisions are based on, here's where I want my music to go, and then the strategy comes second. Now, her move to pop music was the same thing. It was a music-first strategy. She has talked about this where she said, my music is changing. I'm more into pop music than country music now. And even though it's a big risk, she said it would be even bigger risk if I didn't follow what I wanted to do because my fans would see right through it. She said, I'm not going to chase 2 rabbits anymore. I'm not doing country and pop because my fans will see right through it if I just put 3 country songs on this album just to satisfy the gatekeepers in country radio. So yeah, music first. I don't think she's sitting there saying, oh, what are the numbers? It looks like, you know, the data showing I should move to pop music. I don't think she did. She probably does that a little bit, but I think her best decisions have been based on what she wants to do personally. The fan obsession is even more important, I think. Taylor understands that superstars aren't self-made. Even if you think she's the most talented person in the world, talent matters, yes, but probably not as much as we think it does. Superstars are a fan-generated phenomenon. You can be the most talented person in the world, but you're not going to be a superstar if you don't have millions of fans. And she's always been extremely fan-obsessed. Jeff Bezos has a quote where, in one of his shareholder letters, where he says, even though our customers say that they love us, deep down, they want something more from us, and it's our job to continually surprise and delight them. And that's what Taylor does. She finds new ways to surprise and delight her fans, which fortifies the bonds that she has with her fans and then encourages those fans to reach out to other fans. So a lot of her social media strategies you see these days, all the hints, all the clues, all the hidden messages that non-fans would look at and say, what is going on here? Like if you go on the internet, if you go on TikTok or Instagram Reels and you get caught in that algorithm, you will be extremely confused. You'll be like, what has happened to me? What are these people talking about? Like, what? She's wearing orange and that means this? Like, people will be really confused, yet her fans understand that. And she knows that whatever she says and whatever she wears is a source of intrigue. And she stokes those flames. And then her fans will then go on TikTok and Instagram and post about this. And then via personalized algorithms, it ends up in my feed and other people's feeds. That's social influence. That's what causes artists to expand their fan base. And Taylor has always found a way to stoke those flames from a very early age, and she continues to do it in really masterful ways. And that's why she's found longevity, and that's why she's been able to increase the size of her fan base, even though she's 20 years into her career.
And the focus is on the super fans. There's a sort of an elite group. It's not just trying to reach a broad group of people, but focused on a select.
Yes, the focus is mostly on super fans. Now, Taylor has changed her strategies through the years. Back in, say, 2006, 2010, the industry was different. She would make broad pushes. She would do, Vogue cover stories, and she would go on late night TV, and she would do all these things because it was the way to reach the largest amount of people. But the industry has changed, and even indie artists are taught it's really hard to reach a broad audience. You should really find your true fans, your super fans, and you should cater everything you do to those super fans. One, because they're the most passionate part of your fan base. They will be evangelists for you, so they'll help with that social influence, but to be honest, they'll also spend more money. And Taylor, even though she's a huge artist, she's the biggest artist we have right now, really does tailor most of her strategies to her super fans. And all of the hype around her starts with the fan base. It all starts with those hidden messages, all those marketing techniques that get her fans excited. And then they're the ones pushing the album. They're evangelists for her. It spreads on social media. And then the mainstream media picks up on it. And then it spreads that way. But it all starts with her super fans.
And how would you compare Taylor's approach to, say, Beyonce or some others? Is she doing things that other artists aren't doing, or is she just doing them better? How do you compare across artists?
Her fan obsession is next level, I'd say. And in business too, you say, oh, we need to be customer obsessed. We need to be customer obsessed. It's become a cliche at this point, but not many companies are like truly customer obsessed. And I think it's the same way with artists. Not many artists are truly fan obsessed the way that she is. And she doesn't need to be. I mean, think about her recent rollout. She could have announced the album on social media, and that's all she would have needed to do. It would have caused, people would have been, oh, new Taylor Swift album. The media would have caught on, yet she had a long lead up with all these hints and clues, and then she decides to go on the New Heights podcast. Again, something she doesn't have to do, but she hasn't done many interviews like that lately. And I think her fans were clamoring for it, so that's why she did it. And it's another example of her fan obsession. And the Eras Tour was another example. Taylor could have played 2-hour shows, greatest hits. She'd never done that before. I think her fans would have walked away happy. Yeah, she plays 3.5 hours, 3-4 nights in a row, which had to come at great cost to her physically and emotionally. Yet she did it anyway. And I think that's a big reason why she is the most popular superstar we have. And it's not even close. Like, it's really not close. And in 2024, I believe, she herself represented 1% of the total the recorded US music market, which is an astonishing number. There's thousands, if not millions, of artists on Spotify making music, and she represented 1% of all of that. That's a huge number. And yeah, no one's even close. Then her Tortured Poets album was twice as more popular as the second most popular album, which belonged to Morgan Wallen. So she's in a category all by herself right now. And it's not just because of her talent, it's because of her fan obsession.
So you came at this, from the Harvard Business Review and interested in sort of some of the broader lessons. What can we learn from Taylor Swift's experience and career? I mean, we have budding artists here, talented people who are thinking about their future. What can other artists take away from her approach that might be useful for them?
So a couple things. One, we touched on, I think the risk-taking is important. Sometimes you need to take risks at times when you otherwise wouldn't think that you would need to make them. Sometimes it's better to take a risk when you have a lot of leverage and you're really successful. The second thing I'll say, and this is probably the most important thing, is she she operates her career from a sense of humility. She's a huge superstar. Could you imagine 90,000 people calling your name like 3 nights a week? I mean, for some superstars, that would have to mess with your head. And and I think this goes back to her fan-first mentality. Like, she understands that even though she's super successful, it may not last that long, and she has voiced this concern many times. And she knows that it's not just about her, it's also about the people who got her there, and that's her fans. And that's why she does whatever she can to surprise and delight them in new ways. And I do think that comes from a place of extreme humility.
So we want to turn to the audience because I know there are a lot of questions. One last quick one. You've covered her career up to this point. Any forecasts of the future? Any insights in terms of where she might be going or what you see for her in the years to come?
It has to be hard for her because the Eras Tour was so successful. It's the highest grossing tour of all time. She played 140 plus shows across the US and abroad, and it received massive attention. So I imagine if I were her, walking off that stage for the last time must have been exhilarating, but it also had to be daunting. It's like, where do you go from here? Will she top that? I don't know. It's in some ways it's hard to believe that she will, but people questioned this before, and I'd say her instincts and her approaches to her career are just so sound. As long as she continues to take risks, as long as she continues to be fan first and a music first type of artist, sky's the limit, I think. I mean, there's a whole globe that she hasn't conquered yet, right? She could conquer India. She could move further into China. It would not surprise me if she finds some way to top what she's done. It may be next year, it could be 4 years from now, but I think she'll find a way to do it.
Okay. Floor is open to you and any questions you might have. We have a question down front here.
Hello, I'm Carolyn, a super fan of Taylor Swift. You know, her new album, they say it's going to be a pop album.
Yep.
She's going back to pop. Do you think that's something strategic that Taylor Swift is doing for the fans and like also just for money? Or do you think that's like something genuine that she wants to get back into?
I think it's strategic in the sense that she had this huge success with the Eras Tour, and you would think she had that success gave her a lot of choices. She could move more into indie rock, she could experiment with her sound. But history has proven that when she's at the top, she tends to double and triple down. Like, she flies right toward the sun. And with this album, it did not surprise me in the least that she's partnering with Max Martin and Shellback again. Those are two producers who she worked with on 1989 and her follow-up Reputation. They're just big Swedish producers, huge pop hits. And so it does not surprise me that she is moving toward like chart supremacy. She wants a huge hit. She wants Billboard hits. And yeah, it's sort of fascinating how she's moving in that direction after such a huge success. I feel like she just wants to keep it up and keep it up and keep it up.
So no retirement anytime soon?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay. Question back here.
Hi, thank you. Thanks so much. I'm really enjoying the book. I'm about 3/4 of the way through. I'm listening to it, actually. Highly recommend the audiobook if you don't want to read it while you're walking your dog. It's great. One of the things I really like about it is, like, from the title, you know, you can imagine, I mean, I think in your comments you really said this nicely, that strategic can sound like a bad word. The epigram you used in the beginning of her famous thing that when men do it, it's called strategic. When women do it, it's called calculated. But one of the things that really comes through in the book that I like is a word that we would normally see as intention with strategic, which is authentic. I think you do such a good job showing how there's a strategy there, but it's like actually her authenticity at these different phases that are driving the decision. So I love that. That's not my question though. Sorry, my question is just, it's such a, I mean, it seems like such a fun book to write. I'm super jealous. I wrote a not fun book recently, so this sounds fun. But I'm wondering of like, can you tell us about like challenges, or was there something that you just had to cut that, you know, you left it on the floor, the editing floor, or what was difficult? Was it like the Eras tour that suddenly threw you for a loop, or what was like the biggest challenge in writing it?
There's a couple things. The first thing is Taylor was moving at a much faster clip than I was writing. She's really hard to keep track of. So I did start the book while she started the Eras tour, but then she released Tortured Poets Department, and there was just so much to keep track of. So that was hard. I was writing the book at a fast clip. I wrote it in a year, which is really fast. And Taylor made me feel lazy because she was just, you know, traveling the globe, releasing new music, and I just couldn't keep up. The other thing that was challenging, but I also thought it was like the greatest opportunity when I was writing the book, is it's a meld of narrative and analysis. And many times it was hard to keep the balance right. And I really wanted to give her as much main character energy as I could, even though I didn't talk to her, but there's so many quotes from her that I could use. I really wanted her to be the propulsive force. I wanted her to be the main character in a sense, and then everything to stem from that. And I wanted it to be an emotional experience for people. I wanted people to see how she's navigated these challenges in chronological order. And yeah, that was the hardest part, just really keeping her at the center of the narrative and not drifting too far from her, yet still adding enough analysis and insights that people felt, even hardcore fans, felt like they were learning something new.
Hi, I was thinking that while Taylor Swift has a lot of super fans, with the amount of popularity that she has, there also comes a lot of negativity and people that don't like her a lot, and people are very vocal about it too. So I was kind of thinking whether part of her success had anything to do with how she deals with this, or even if she tries to contain it, if at all, or how she manages this aspect.
That's a great question. Taylor, she's such an odd superstar because, and this has been the case from very early on in her career, she receives a lot of flowers, don't get me wrong, she receives a lot of praise, yet she receives a lot of negative attention, as you mentioned. And I think a lot of it stems, there's many reasons why she faces so much criticism. I think part of the reason why she receives a lot of criticism is we tend not to understand how culture markets work. Like I mentioned earlier, talent is really important, but there's a lot of luck, randomness, and social influence involved. And even though she's stoking those flames, I think when we see someone who's received such outsized attention, it's not the type of music that we like, we can't quite equate because we think that the artists that we love are famous and great because they're just the most talented people in the world, which again isn't the case. And music isn't a meritocracy. And though I'd argue that Taylor Swift is extremely talented, I do think that some people just can't quite equate why she's so famous and why she's so popular. I do also think that it has to do with who she is and who she's singing to. Historically, artists like her, poets like her, have received a lot of criticism. And when I say someone like her and the people she's singing to, I mean, she's a woman singing for a predominantly female audience. In the beginning of her career, since she was a teenager, singing for teenage girls, that caused a lot of criticism. And if you look back in history, the Beatles received a lot of criticism for reaching the same audience very early on in their career. I always go back to the term Beatlemania. It sounds like a term of endearment, but in some ways it wasn't. The term mania, it's as if these female fans were hysterical, right? Like they weren't so much about the art, they were just overcome by emotion. And of course, when Bruce Springsteen fans go crazy about Bruce Springsteen, are they emotional? Yes, but they're also using logic. Taylor Swift fans are the same way. So I do think that's a big part of the criticism too.
Just to follow up on that, how has she handled that or how has she adjusted to it? Because she has taken a lot of shots and it can't be easy.
One of the best stories in the book is in 2009, Kanye West went on stage during the 2009 VMAs Taylor had just received an award. She was a teenager at the time. I think she was 17 or 18. And like very young Taylor was extremely excited to receive awards. Another thing she was criticized for, she didn't hide her excitement. And so she's up there very excited. Kanye West comes up, takes the mic out of her hand and says, I'm gonna let you finish, but Beyonce had the best video of all time. He was telling her in front of millions of people that you don't deserve to be here. You're not good enough. And at the Grammys, which was three to 4 months later, Taylor received the most prestigious award in music. It was Album of the Year for her album Fearless. Yes, she had a performance with Stevie Nicks that was pitchy. It wasn't really good. And a lot of her live performances at the time, she had some trouble. I think she was nervous and she didn't really have the vocal power to sustain a vocal performance, really, in some of her performances. And she was receiving so much criticism. And what does she do? She takes some of the criticism to heart, and she's talked about this recently. She got vocal lessons and improved her vocals, right? So not all criticism is bad. Sometimes criticism is good. But she also defiantly decided that if you're going to criticize me for my music, well, I'm not going to use co-writers on this album. I'm going to write the music all by myself. And that's what she did. Her third album, Speak Now, was solely written by her. She didn't use any co-writers. And I saw that as an act of defiance. Yes, you're going to criticize me and I will improve, but on the other hand, I'm going to double and triple down on what I'm really good at. And she also used that as part of her promotional campaign. She made sure everyone knew that she wrote those songs by herself. And I think that sums up Taylor to a T. I talked to her former manager when I was in Nashville recently, and he said that she's really good at taking criticism, and she will take it to heart, and she asks for the criticisms. No, she's not asking for all the public outcry about what she's doing. I don't think she was asking for the Twitter rage about her songwriting and her voice. Yet she still finds a way to not change so much that she's doing it in an authentic way. I think she has a very strong idea of what she's good at, and she never wavers from that, even though she receives a lot of criticism.
Other questions? We have one in the back there, and then we'll come back up here.
Hi, thank you so much for coming here. It was great to hear you talk. And I had actually a thing I was wondering about, because as you said, Taylor is a very prolific artist. She released 8 albums in the last 5 years while doing a mega tour. How does she physically sustain this kind of work ethic? Because I mean, most humans would be simply not able to do so.
I wish I had an answer to that question, because I would bottle that up and I would be the most driven person that you've ever met in your life. I don't know. I think part of it is she really deeply cares about what she does, and you would think that a lot of artists do, but I think art is like any other job. Some people love it, some people don't. And if we were in a room with Taylor Swift and no one knew who Taylor Swift was, and we asked her, hey, introduce yourself, like tell us about yourself, I think the first thing she would say is, I'm a singer-songwriter. And music, and we use that term music first, I think she cares deeply about what she's doing. And another thing that really helps her too is that she's in full control of what she's doing. A lot of artists are like actors and actresses. They're really dependent on the script that they're giving. A lot of artists are shopping for songwriters. They're shopping for producers in order to give them songs. And Taylor doesn't do that, really. She's in full control. She's in full creative control of what she's doing. And I think that allows her to be as prolific as she is. She doesn't have to depend on anyone else.
Have you heard of the Taylor Swift workout? Can anyone elaborate on that? Do you know what that is? This is where the documentaries are really useful. Apparently, in preparation for these tours, she will go on a treadmill for 3 hours singing, and she doesn't stop the treadmill. And that's just to get physically able to do what she does on stage. And so the physical aspect of that is just astounding, in addition to everything else.
I have to imagine that halfway through the Eras tour, maybe 3 weeks into the Eras tour, she had to think, what was I thinking? She really had to. I mean, 3.5 hours in like Louboutin boots. She had to be, I don't know if I made the right decision here yet. And she couldn't pull back. There's no way she could have pulled back. But that's just the type of person she is.
Question down here.
I'm curious about your research process. Were you on TikTok? What people were you following? What forums were you on? And I also think it's really easy to get in like read articles that are really hating on Taylor Swift. So like, how do you find your own opinion through all of the media out there on your version of Taylor Swift?
My goal ultimately was to write a book from a neutral perspective, which I think I accomplished. I read everything I could about Taylor. I really started with her own words. When I started the book, I was really trying to plot out her career and the major decisions that she faced throughout her career, and then tried to get her perspective through interviews and such. I was on TikTok, I was on Instagram a lot. The great thing about the way social media works these days is my phone knows that I'm doing research on Taylor Swift, so every time I opened up Instagram, every time I opened up the TikTok, it seemed like it was serving me great content. Stuff from videos from when she was 16 years old to new videos. So I had a wealth of content to use, which is great.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. I'm a father of 3 daughters, and I think I know the lyrics to just about every Taylor song. So one of them's here with me.
Can we put that to a test?
Yeah, maybe. I won't sing them now. I'm thinking about, again, what's next for Taylor. She's generated incredible wealth over the years now. I think she's well past the $1 billion net worth mark. Is she starting to think about publicly declaring causes that she's interested in? Is she becoming a philanthropist? Can you speak a little bit to that?
I don't have any inside details, but I know during the Eras tour, every stop that she went to, she made a substantial donation to local food banks. Most of her philanthropy is she tends to keep secret. And I think a big reason for that is anytime she does anything, if she visits a hospital or donates money, she gets criticized for doing it for PR purposes. So I do think that she keeps a lot of that secret. I mean, the other thing I can say is she tends to really help out the people that work for her. There's a story that came out during the first leg, at the end of the first leg of the Eras tour, she gave each of her truck drivers, I think, $100,000. So it does seem like she tries to give back, and she does try to help out her own workers and employees.
This also raises the issue of politics and the arts, because that becomes a hot button issue too, where you can lose a fan base or part of it by declaring for a candidate. So how has she navigated it, and going forward, how do you think she's going to continue on that?
So for most of her career, she did what many artists used to do. They wouldn't speak up. She's a major brand. She's a cross-generational brand, and she didn't speak up about these things. I think things had changed starting in 2019, and a lot of people, and this happens in businesses too, is like we want our leaders to speak out about certain social issues. Whether they should or not, I'm not sure. But I think Taylor was receiving a lot of, I wouldn't say pushback, but I think a lot of her fans online were looking for her to speak out about certain social causes. She did this for the first time in 2019. If you've ever seen the documentary Miss Americana, it really goes deep into her decision to do that, which is an interesting choice. I mean, it's a bold choice because if you look at the data that I just looked at recently, it's almost a 50-50 split with her audience between conservatives and liberals. So by speaking out and choosing one side, there's a risk of losing part of her fan base. And she came out and endorsed Kamala Harris recently. So she's not constantly online talking about political issues. She tends to choose her spots, but this is a big change for her.
Question down here.
Yeah, I think I have like a follow-up question to that because I feel like Taylor Swift has been like very political, and not only like socially but through her music as well. But then you mentioned about how she has like a split audience, but I feel like she's also been able to maintain that support. Like, how do you think she has navigated that? And I know a lot of artists have like lost support, has been canceled over their like political opinions, but then she's still on top. Like, how would you sort of,
Yeah, it's a great question because if you look at the data, she doesn't really lose fans. I mean, she's increased her fan base over time, even though she is making these political comments. I think a lot of it has to do with the close bonds that she's created with those fans and her fan obsession. She doesn't take that lightly, and since she goes above and beyond to even go beyond their wildest expectations, I think that creates pretty close bonds with her and her fans, and I think that gives her more of a leeway than some other artists.
Question over here and then over here.
To be honest, I'm more of a sports fan than a music fan. But my interest is there's always been a ton of things in the news recently about her and Jason Kelsey there. And I think a lot of it generated very positive publicity for her as well. But staying with the kind of financial theme here, do you see as you going forward, like cross-marketing purposes between her career and Jason Kelsey? Like I know she announced on Jason's podcast and everything, so they're working together, obviously. Do you see this as another strategic move going forward where you take two very recognizable names in two different spheres? Is that going to be, I don't know, some kind of collateral exposure?
It's an interesting question because her going on the New Heights podcast with Jason and Travis was a big pivot for her. Even though she writes about her relationships in her songs, her relationships have been kept relatively private in terms of her. She doesn't necessarily put those relationships out. In terms of paparazzi, yes. But in terms of her actively going out in public or on social media and putting those relationships out for everyone to consume, she hasn't done that. And this is a change for her. And I think a lot of it has to do with controlling her own narrative. Not only do you have to worry about tabloid media now, like Princess Diana had to do back in the day, she has to worry about TikTok and Instagram. Like, we're all gossip columnists now. And she knows that everyone else is going to speculate about it, so why not just put it out in the open? This is something that Selena Gomez did recently. Sabrina Carpenter has done this recently. And I think Taylor is following suit. I don't think it's necessarily strategic on her part. I think the New Heights podcast was, I think it worked because it was so shocking to her fans. I don't think anyone was expecting it. And when I first saw the clip announcing it, I thought it was AI generated. I did not think it was real because it was shocking. I'm like, you're going on your fiance's podcast. You've never done something like this before. And so I think it did surprise and delight her fans in major ways. And it was also a situation where she'd be completely comfortable. She didn't have to worry about hard-hitting questions from you or anyone else, And yeah, so I think that's why she did it. In terms of, is there going to be cross-promotional stuff? I don't know. She's always walked a fine line, and I think in the future she'll probably let some of that stuff happen organically. But I also think she went on the New Heights podcast to help out Travis because she's way more famous than he is, and it really helped his podcast.
Thanks. I'd love to hear more what you think about the whole master's ownership and the business side of that. She seems to like really, really, really care about owning her masters. I don't know much about money and music, so like, is that just a financial thing, or it seems maybe there's more than financial motivation, something intrinsic in her just wants the ownership. And then along the same lines, she's talked about not being given the opportunity to buy it previously until this year. And I'm curious, like, what happened? Like, why, if you have any idea of like why she couldn't buy it, like, did she needed the money she made from the Eras tour, or was something more complicated going on?
I think it was intrinsic. I think it was psychological. I don't think she was doing it for financial reasons because it was a pretty risky and crazy idea to decide to re-record. She ended up re-recording 4 of them, but at the time she was going to re-record 6 of her original albums. They were close facsimiles of those original albums, and she was essentially telling her fans, hey, I'm going to redo these albums that you have such a close personal relationship with, and all these albums that are so embedded in your own memories. Well, don't listen to those. Listen to the new stuff. And she was very forthright about her heartbreak over the fact that her master recordings were sold. So just so everyone knows, she had signed a contract when she was 16 with the man Scott Bruschetta, who I talked about earlier. He owned her master recordings, and master recordings just refer to the actual recording for those albums. But if you own the masters, you are in charge of how those albums are disseminated. Taylor Swift was still making royalties from those master recordings, but she felt she had such a strong sense of ownership over that music, and I understand why she did, because she was writing her own songs about her own experiences, but she had also built a brand based on her relatability and her authenticity, and as I mentioned, this fan obsession, just going above and beyond to create this huge, very passionate fan base. So I understand why, in business terms, most artists don't own their masters, but in Taylor's terms, why she was so emotional and so, and I mean that in a good way, and so passionate about owning those master recordings. So she ended up doing something that no artist has ever really done. Some artists have re-recorded old songs, some have recorded albums, but not at the scale that she's done. And on paper, you would think, okay, you're going to re-record those old albums. There's no way they're going to be very successful, because who wants to just listen to close facsimiles of music that I've already listened to? Yet her ability to tell stories and to galvanize her fan base allowed her to really make those albums successes. And because those albums were huge successes, the re-records I'm talking about, she undermined the value of her older music, those old recordings. So they're originally sold for $300 million, then they're sold to another party for $350 million. After the Eras tour, she decided to buy those master recordings back, the original recordings. So now she has the re-records, and now she owns the original masters. But she bought those masters for the same price that they were sold for, which is around, the number hasn't been released, but it was allegedly around $350 million. Well, the prices for catalog music has increased like 2 to 3-fold since the time she's done her re-recordings. So she did undermine the value. Those master recordings should have been much more expensive when she bought those back. I think it's one of the most punk rock moves in music history to essentially undermine her own albums and then go ahead and buy those back and undermine the value of those albums. It's a punk rock move, that's all I'll say.
If there aren't any other questions, I have 1 or 2 more just to wrap up.
Yeah.
Part of her talent is the incredible storytelling that comes out through the songs. What are some of the lessons that business leaders, communicators, students, others can learn from storytelling and getting your message across? And she does it so effectively. Sort of broader lessons aside from the music industry per se.
If you look at the history of music, most artists they're a little aloof, they're a little edgy. They're not necessarily going to explain their art to their fans. Taylor doubles down on communication. She's really, really good at communication. And I'll go back to her move to pop music. At the time, this is with her album 1989. At the time, so many artists were trying to find new ways to catch the attention of fans. Some people may be too young to know this, but back in 2014, I and millions of other people woke up and we had a new U2 album on our iTunes, and no one wanted that except for U2 fans. So that was a creative thing that U2 and Apple did to push music into our phones. Jay-Z did something similar with Samsung. Beyonce at the time surprise dropped an album on iTunes and didn't tell anyone about it. It's just all of a sudden showed up on iTunes, and then it created this huge hype because people found it, and then it spread on social media. Taylor could have done something like that, but she decided to host a live stream with her super fans, and I mean, it almost looked like a Apple does their product launches. I mean, that's what it looked like. She was sitting on stage like an overcaffeinated morning TV host. There was no facilitator. It was just her and her fans. And she talked about why she was moving to pop music in very personal terms. She said, this is about personal growth for me. I had to make this album. I really thought that if I didn't, it would be inauthentic, and was very clear about why she was making this decision. That seems to be something that you're taught in the corporate world, to be so forthcoming in your communication, not necessarily forthcoming, but to be really clear about why you're making a transformation. It's really important to build trust with your audience. I'm not so sure that a lot of other artists would go to such extremes. So I think in terms of storytelling, it's not only about her songs, it's also about the story that she builds around her choices and why she does certain things. And I think that gives her a lot of leeway with her fans.
So the book is There's Nothing Like It, The Strategic Genius of Taylor Swift. Thank you very much, Kevin Evers, for coming to campus and
Thank
talking
you.
with us.
Appreciate it.